So the Times newspaper today, Wednesday, the 14th of October 2020, is exposed as being idiotically edited, or whoever is responsible for the so-called leader column or leader piece that is running this piece about mea culpa, which is a case they're making for more mayors, elected mayors. And as we have said in the previous part A, it's a grotesque distortion of the actual role being played by the regional mayors over the lockdown and the particular role that prompted the Times, which is a cons supporting peddler of lies, because the dirty digger Murdoch owns and controls the Times. The role played by the West Midlands mayor, who is a cons mayor, and that cons mayor was only elected following a demonizing campaign by Fleet Street against the Labour candidate. Having said that, that is only factually being stated here, not because I or the Khudila campaign is remotely supportive of the elected mayor post whatsoever. We don't support it, we oppose it because it's grotesquely worse, anti-democratic, worse than whatever exists currently in local councils and local authorities and regional organizations, regional assemblies. The Times is saying mea culpa. The emergence of England's regional mayors as a political force is a welcome development. Boris Johnson should embrace further devolution. This is completely untruthful, stupid, ignorant, misleading, and anti-democratic, and corrupt, and corrupting. The regional mayors have not emerged as a force for the good. And Johnson must not embrace this further degeneration of democracy. Now, they're saying in the beginning of this, whoever the idiot is who wrote this thing, England's young constitutional settlement is coming of age. What rubbish. England's young constitutional settlement. What rubbish. When the histories of this period are written, they are likely to record that it was the mayors of the great cities and regions rather than Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader who emerged as the primary tribunes of popular opposition to Boris Johnson's handling of the pandemic. As the second wave gathered pace. Now, there is no need to read all of that because this is completely the opposite to what the Times said about the socialist councils that opposed Margaret Thatcher and aligned themselves with the Ken Livingstone-fronted Greater London Council in the early 1980s. This is exactly the opposite of what they had said about the Labour councils and the leaders opposing Margaret Thatcher. There is no special attribute or quality that is attached to the corrupt post of mayor that is actually making the determining difference. It is the evidence of the lockdown that is being opposed by ordinary people, being affected as the ordinary people are affected by it. Again, generically, because the newspapers, including the Times, is not and are not giving the evidence of the micro kind of effects and impacts of the lockdown. So it's a kind of general thing that is being run. But even so, the general statements being made by, and yesterday I referred to Sheffield Council, City Council's, not yesterday, on Sunday, I referred to Sheffield City Council's then leader, David Blunkett. Blunkett was, as I said, one of the so-called socialist Labour Council leaders that used to be kind of contacted by Ken Livingstone-fronted Greater London Council. And they were trying to create an alliance, a platform of socialist Labour councils opposed to Margaret Thatcher. And all the papers, including the Boris Graph of today and the Times, were opposed to that kind of alliance. And they treated that alliance as a negative thing, as an anti-patriotic, anti-British thing, anti-English thing. And yet here is this stupid Times saying exactly the same kind of context. The local councils concerned in the concerned areas opposing the central government of a conservative party. And it is completely corrupt. And I'm making the distinction because I was there when the Livingstone fronted cabal of the GLC was staging the stunts. I am not convinced that the mayors, as I said in part A, the mayors today are making any special case of special contribution, contrary to the Mayor Kalpa editorial that the stupid, ignorant, and corrupt Times is running today. Because most of the people who are in the affected areas in the north, across the north of England, are not, thankfully so far, lumbered with an elected mayor in their areas. Most of these areas are covered by local councils or county councils. Despite the fact that the county councils like Northumberland are corrupt to the core, still they are, in terms of the damage to democracy, they are less dangerous and damaging than they would be like if Northumberland were lumbered with an elected mayor. In West Midlands, the elected mayor is not playing any significant role whatsoever, nor is Rotherham, who is a kind of supporter of Corbyn, or Corbyn supported kind of post holder in Liverpool, the regional mayor, not the Liverpool's own mayor, the mayor in post, is doing anything special or spectacular, and most certainly not for democracy. What these people are doing is typically corrupt English careerist politics and politicking. What they're doing is kind of jumping on the bandwagon and opposing Boris Johnson's kind of cabal of lockdowns and idiotic disarray of lockdown. So whichever or whatever standpoint the whole mess is looked at, it is a mess. And it is a completely disgraceful, anti-democratic mess that the Labour Party should be actually playing a part in pointing at and demanding action on. So the Times editorial there, Mia Kalpa headed editorial, dismisses the Labour Party. It says it's not the Keir Starmer that is kind of acting as the tribune of the people, the voice of the people, the loud voice of the people, the authentic voice of the people on the ground, but it's these mayors, which none of the reports that even the Times has published, and none of the reports in the other papers in Fleet Street supports. This is a rubbish, completely untruthful, corrupt kind of idea. And the reason why these Times and the Murdoch want local areas to be lumbered with elected mayor is an brazenly opportunistic, corrupt, capitalistic, big business agenda, anti-democratic agenda. For example, in Tower Hamlets, there is voting system in the so-called, staged council meetings. Because when there is an imposed kind of mayor imposed, elected councillors cease to be the democratic voice that there should be and could be otherwise. And so therefore what has happened is, I told Robin Wales on a live program on the 14th of March 2018, days before he was kind of deselected and replaced by Roxana Fias in Newham. An elected mayor such as Robin Wales was a corrupting mayor, a corrupting influence, a corrupting deterrent to democracy, local democracy. And I said the word coward. He said the elected mayors in Newham were cowering under the dictatorial kind of sub-fascistic, abusive influence and dominance by him, that is Robin Wales. Cowering, cowering, cowering. Not coward, but cowering. And cowering is not far from cowardly. So the Newham elected mayor was an embodiment of dictatorial abuse of local democracy, dictatorial denial of local democracy. So the Times is completely out of its depth and out of contact with the realities. And dirty digger Rupert Murdoch, who owns the Times, doesn't care about it. In fact, dirty digger is dirty because all his journalism, so-called, is absolute lies. Most of his journalism is lies. As the current issue of Private Eye has pointed out, the obituary, so-called, that the Times ran after Harold Evans died last week, or in the last fortnight, let's say, was full of lies against Evans and for dirty digger Rupert Murdoch. So anyone who says, and there are lots of people in the so-called British mainstream who make excuses for the dirty digger Murdoch and make false claims saying that he doesn't interfere in the day-to-day decision making of the newspapers like the Times or the Scum. But he does, as the obituary, as examined by the Private Eye, although it is not anywhere near as full, as detailed as it should be. But even though it is that short, even in that short version, Private Eye actually sums up quite a lot of the facts and the accuracy of the goings on in the Times, at the Times, within the Times newspaper, and the Scum, and this Scum on Sunday, and any of the other organs of the so-called media that the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch, the liar, kind of controls and owns. And as the evidence shows, the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch became a billionaire, and he went to America to conquer America, where he now controls the corrupt Fox News, and also has owned and acquired the ownership of the Wall Street Journal, which is a completely different kind of sector and segment of the media. But the reason why he was able to do that was because of the massively pornographic kind of industry that he ran by the Scum. And he exploited the female body. Most of the body that he exploited, every issue of the outlet, was a white young female. And the gullibles, most of them white kind of punters of the Scum, they punted for the Scum because of the white body or the young body. And it was a brazen pornographic abuse of the female body and of the womanhood that Murdoch corrupted this country with, and he became a billionaire. And he still is enjoying immunity from scrutiny and examination, where there is no real audit published of how much tax he owes and how much tax he pays and how much other fiddles he manages. Because as I have said, during the Levison inquiry hearings, so-called, although the Levison report has had little impact in terms of practical kind of translation of any reform or so-called changes, but the evidence, the actual contents of what was said in evidence by many of the so-called witnesses that Levison decided to call, was the more interesting part of it. Because the evidence shows the extent of corruption and corrupt relationship between Murdoch and the series of UK prime ministers. And they spanned Labour and Tory. And they most certainly emphatically, shamelessly included Tony B. Lyer, as they did Dave the Moron Scammeron. And of course, they did others. But the main scandal of Murdoch's connections were actually conducted, if you like, via Rebecca Brooks. To this day, none of the media, including Private Eye, which pretends to be critical of Rebecca Brooks, none of them has published the secret why Rebecca Brooks was given such a pivotal part to play by Murdoch. What is her secret? Because Rebecca Brooks does not come across as in any way as intelligent as he should be if she were to objectively be appointed to the position where she has been given 3 millions of pounds by Murdoch under the pretext of her being the boss of Murdoch's operations in Wapping, and now they are on the other side of the river, not far from Wapping. It's just opposite the opposite bank of the River Thames. Now, the Times, therefore, is completely stupid and typically representing the voice of Rupert Murdoch, who doesn't want democracy to function. Rupert Murdoch wants democracy to be discouraged, to be deflected, and to be defeated. And that is done in terms of the local councils and so-called regional kind of authorities. First, by foisting the anti-democratic imposition of the corrupt post and the corrupting post seeker of elected mayor. And that is why there is nothing in that mea culpa editorial about democracy whatsoever. And the reason why they want, Murdoch and others want a mayor rather than any number of elected councillors or regional assembly members making the decisions about what happens in that community in the name of that community or those communities is simple. They want to have a direct access to one single person who can be easily bribed, and that is what is happening. Bribery doesn't have to be in the form of a kind of sum of money on the table. Bribery can be in various forms. And that is what is happening in Tower Hamlets, and that is what is happening in Newham. And I shall come to Newham in a minute to illustrate just how corrupt the elected mayor that has succeeded Robin Wales has been. The essential argument against elected mayor is based on accountability and democracy. As anyone who has been studying knows, studying the state of British local democracy knows, and anyone who has been actually studying and been involved in campaigning for local democracy knows even better. And I'm one of those people who have been actively engaged in demanding and advocating for local democracy for all this time. And I don't have any doubt whatsoever that there is no evidence of any university level or college level or others kind of so-called government kind of studying institutions like the Institute of Government and whatever, doing any, and I repeat, any actual study of the absence of democracy, killing of democracy through the local councils. And I'm the one who has had reason to campaign continuously for democracy. And in doing that, I have come across, as I am coming across today, Wednesday, the 14th of October 2020, rampant evidence of open corruption and criminality by and via the local councils. And this time it is Newham. On the 4th of September 2018, I was at the East Ham Town Hall, which is the Barking Road, which is not far from Barking Town Centre, but it is part of Newham. And Newham's East Ham Town Hall is where the meeting of the mayor's cabinet had taken place minutes earlier. And I had left, and I was trying to get some basic facts about the administration of access to observe the meeting. And I was speaking to a person who was at the reception desk at that time. I had never, until that evening, spoken to Roxana Fayaz. I had not been within any known kind of distance of her, approximation of her or whatever. And I had never spoken to her or wanted to speak to her or had any occasion to speak to her. So while I was speaking to this person at the reception desk on that night, 4th of September 2018, I heard a voice behind me saying words to the effect that I can interpret as being positive and in praise of my role. Now, I turned, whatever the words were, I had to, because somebody else was speaking to me from behind me. And I turned around and I saw this person whom I recognized from pictures as being Roxana Fayaz. And the things she said, and this is an exclusive world, exclusive diagnosis and report. Things she said about me included clear statement that she had to thank me, and she was thanking me for confirming the transparency duty that she had. She was thanking me for that. Now, I had never spoken to her. Until that time, I had had no contact with her, and I had no communications with her of any accessible, demonstrable form. So what was she talking about? What transparency was she talking about and thanking me for? And she said at the beginning words to the effect that she was thanking me for holding her and her kind of, presumably, her co-plotters or colleagues or whatever to account. Now, as she was speaking to me, or as I was speaking to her, and as we were having the short conversation, I saw somebody again I knew from pictures to be John Gray. And there was another person who I didn't recognize, but I cannot recall at this minute, but there was another person. And a person of African origin, she could be from the Caribbean or she could be from Africa, I don't know, suddenly appeared to my right. Roxana Fayaz was to my left, and this person, this female, appeared to my right from nowhere and uttered words that amounted to rushing me to finish the conversation. Now, that amounted to rushing me to finish the conversation has been elaborated on, and extensively so, in about 200 communications I have made since that date to the Newham Council. So I don't have to kind of go item by item and detail here for the first time. And the reason why I have had so many communications sent to Newham Council about that conversation is to do with the lying that Newham Council has been allowed to perpetrate, and Newham Council's employees are allowed to perpetrate even after Ruxana Fiaz took the position previously occupied by Robin Wales. Wales, I had called effectively a dictator, effectively a fascist, effectively a liar. Not the words liar, because the program, wherever the program was, would not kind of have the courage to have that kind of accusation aired on it. And details of that particular channel or outlet I shall be discussing in due course, updating in updated discussion in due course. So Robin Wales, I called in effect a dictator. I called a dictator literally, but I also called him a liar, and I called him an ignorant idiot because he had said Wales, still the elected mayor in place at the expense of Newham Council and Newham people, claiming that the housing crisis in Newham had been caused by and exacerbated by and aggravated by the Conservative Party's policies, especially the right to buy that Margaret Thatcher had introduced. In essence, I said to Wales that that was a lie because he had not challenged Margaret Thatcher's policy in a court of law by exercising what was very much open to him as part of the provision for judicial review. The High Court, where the judicial review has to be applied for and sought through, would not, for example, allow me a judicial review because of its operation of a racist, prejudiced kind of agenda, despite the fact that I would have a higher kind of number of grounds to seek judicial review against any number of organizations that are covered by the provision of judicial review. But essentially, Robin Wales could have been applying for judicial review against the Thatcher government, compelling local councils to allow the right to buy. It could be a constitutional law challenge. It might be lost, it might have been lost, but Robin Wales would have made a historic intervention. But he didn't. And he kept saying that he was advised by lawyers not to do that. Now, my answer is that there can be a lawyer who can advise against one particular course of action or not. But the person who is being advised and who is the front person of the decision-making body, in this case it was Newham Council, was under no obligation to accept one advice or other, or the advice one way or the other. That person had the constitutional option to ignore the advice and give their own reason for ignoring the advice. But in the case of Robin Wales, 16 years in place as the elected mayor at the expense of Newham, 16 years, that is starting 2002 until May 2018, when he was kind of replaced by Roxana Fiaz at the election that took place in the first week of May 2018. So Wales kept saying on the 14th of March 2018 to me on that live program broadcast on a satellite channel that he was advised by lawyers not to seek judicial review or seek any other legal avenue to challenge the Tory policies. I'm not a Tory, I never have been, and it is impossible that I could be a Tory or conservative. But essentially, I am an objective observer, advocate, rights advocate, constitutional law advocate. And I am among the very few number of people who can objectively be on the record described accurately as a very highly skilled constitutional law expert. And I was not aware over 16 years of Wales being in Newham Council as the mayor at the expense of the people of Newham, of having challenged the Conservatives in a court of law. That was the point I was making. And when Wells said that he never said anything, he never says anything that he cannot kind of back up. He said that as a spin, because since that time, when he said that he would make the legal advice available to me, or he would make that advice available to that channel, I said to the viewers, I said, notice what he's saying. The reason I said that instantaneously was because I knew he was lying. Because 16 years, I had not seen anything from him about challenging the Conservative government in a court of law. I was being very clear, and I'm again being very clear. I didn't say that he didn't make any comments apparently against the Conservatives. What I said was that he didn't go to court challenging the Conservative policy or legislation, whatever. So when Roxana Fiers said to me that she was thanking me for holding her to account, I wish that there were viewers and observers of that. There weren't, because it was a meeting. I was leaving kind of the meeting at the Eastham Town Hall, and she kind of deliberately came to me in order to make contact with me and let me know that she knew of my existence. She did that for a purpose. And when I raised this issue later with Newham Council and with the so-called democratic kind of services personnel, through them to Roxana Fiers, she has stayed silent. Now, this is October the 14th, 2020. This is more than 2 years since that conversation. And Roxana Fiers and John Gray have been given hundreds of communications. Now, going by the quality and standard of the legal and constitutional law words and explanations and statements that can be accessed and attributed to David Penick. Penick is a member of the House of Peers, as was one of the team of licensed law traders that were involved in Gina Miller's kind of court challenges through the Supreme Court, challenges to the Conservatives' Brexit kind of policies. And Penick was reported as having been hired by a council in Manchester, which was paying him, council meaning one of the outlets, maybe a football association or football club or something. But it was connected with Manchester, the name Manchester. He was hired by a club or association at the rate of £20,000 for every day of his time. Now, if the quality and the standard and the relevance of David Penick's work is compared to my work, then on that basis, my daily fees should be about 200,000 pounds. But I am not charging a single penny for my work, but I'm just illustrating the significance and the substance of my work as can be compared with the likes of David Penick. Now, why I am not paid 200,000 pounds or even 20,000 pounds is a raging demonstration of everything that is wrong with the legal system and the political system of corruption in this country. And that is where I shall leave that particular corner of comparison. Back to Roxana Fias. Fias said to me that she was thanking me for my role in holding her counsel or herself to account for transparency. Now, that is not the only thing she said. She said other things, positive things about me. Not that I either needed them, nor craved them, nor ever had any need for craving them. I'm the one who actually espouses no ingratiation. I avoid ingratiation, connection, and name dropping, because the very nature of my work is objective, ethical, moral, transparent, accountable, and not dependent on personal favors or personal connections. So the fact that she ingratiated herself to me, no matter how short that moment was, is of extreme significance, because the behavior of the liars that she has been covering up for has been damaging to the cause and the causes of the communities and the purposes of the people that I advocate and I defend and I support and back all the time. And Roxana Fias has provided evidence by saying that she thanked me for providing the transparency reference, confirmation of transparency. What she was saying was that she was in place to create a different kind of environment and delivery and standard of service to the electors of Neom than what had been on offer through Robin Wales. She hasn't. She has been as corrupt as Robin Wales. She has been as dishonest as Robin Wales. And she has been as much in denial as Robin Wales. And she has been completely shameless. I'll give examples. And as I said, this is an exclusive, world exclusive diagnosis of the media. And the media, in context, is here coming from the Times, today's Times, supporting the mayors. And to the point where the Times is saying that the mayors are the tribunes of the people, not Keir Starmer. I am not supporting Keir Starmer by denouncing the mayor. Objectively speaking, I say that the Times is wrong, and Roxana Fias is an embodiment of the fact, of the evidence that the Times is wrong, that the mayors are not good. They are bad for democracy, bad for local councils, bad for accountability, bad for transparency, bad for fairness. And Roxana Fias has made the same kind of tutored, kind of scripted utterance about people being at the heart of everything she does. Or she says, we do. That is, she kind of exploits and appropriates the collective entity of Newham Council. Now, that is a lie. She uttered that lie on the 12th of March, 2 days before Robin Wales appeared on television, live television, opposite me. And on the same channel, she said this thing. She said that she was involved in and dedicated to and committed to treating people as the center of everything that Neom Council did or would do if she got nominated and elected. Now, if that is the case, literally, if that is the case, then how to describe and interpret and judge her lying to me? Because she lied, either she lied on the 4th of September 2018 in Easttown Town Hall, when she praised me from and appeared behind me from nowhere, or she didn't think that I would understand what she was saying. That could be impossible, because she was the one who was treating me as being a source of a moral height. So she could not have misunderstood me. Then why has she been lying since then? One reason why Roxana Fiaz has been lying since then could be to do with the fact that the elected councillors that are currently in place in Neom are playing to keep their careers and their allowances and their positions kind of intact, because the mayor de facto can affect the roles and the allowances and the incomes of the elected mayor's kind of colleagues. And these are colleagues that have no alternative. I mean, all of the councillors are members of the Labour Party. So there is no, as she said on the 12th of March 2018 on that channel, she said Neom is a kind of stronghold, Labour stronghold. I would say on the evidence that Neom is not a Labour stronghold. It needs a bit of a pause before I say the sentence. Neom is a den of criminals. Neom Council is a den of criminals. Neom Labour Party is a den of criminals. Now, I said the same thing, not these words, den of criminals in this phrase, because the conversation I had against Wales on the 14th of March was conducted in the evening when I had no notice that I would be kind of requested to appear before him on that channel. So I literally got a call on the telephone few minutes before the program went on air. So I had no preparation and I had no time to check any of the latest update or facts or evidence, let alone do the research on Robin Wales in an extensive way. So what I said was not a den of criminals. I said that he was a dictator. He was intimidating the councillors. So that was careful. That was actually factual. And yet Robin Wales on that program, on air, falsely, untruthfully, and without any evidence, accused me of insulting the ordinary people of Neom. How could he do that? Only Robin Wales, being dishonest and intellectually challenged, could say that. Because I had made very clear distinction between the ordinary people and the council. And he conflated it right in front of me. And despite my clear objections to that, the person who presented the particular edition didn't appear to know what was going on. That person has a record of not knowing where to follow up and how to follow up things in sequence and in kind of evidential order or ethical order, let alone democratic order. So that is a longer discussion that I shall be having and publishing on in due course. But for this minute, Roxana Fiaz was also intellectually challenged, because when she appeared on the same channel on the 12th of March 2018, literally days before the Neom Labour Party kind of cabal endorsed her as the candidate for the 2018 mayor election in the name of the Labour Party. She said that Robin Wales had been in post as mayor for 12 years. How could she say that? He hadn't been, because he had been for 16 years the mayor of Newham, elected mayor of Newham. And the person who presented this program didn't notice that at all, nor did her kind of propagandist who appeared with her on that program notice that. Nor has any apology for that significant 4-year kind of difference in inaccuracy by 4 years has been apologized for or explained. It could not be explained, but it should have been apologized for the records, by the person or persons involved in and responsible for that broadcast. I make the point not only about that, but also because if she could make a mistake like that, and she did not come back because she was hearing what she was saying, and in the rest of the program, she had the opportunity to come back herself and to apologize for getting this wrong. She didn't, which means that she was incapable of noticing that difference of 4 years. Was it the only one? No. She also made the mistake or untruthful, factually untrue assertion. When she was talking about Newham, she mentioned that as Tower Hamlets. She called it Tower Hamlets. In one part of the sentence, in one part of the program, she referred to Tower Hamlets when she was actually, in the context of everything else she was saying, she was meaning to say Newham. So that's two examples in the course of half an hour of a live program in which Roxana Fayaz came across as being not in control of her facts. The knowledge was lacking. Knowledge about something very central to her ambition. Or, as the Gillard book has described it, her plot. Because Michael Gillard published a book after Fayaz got elected in 2018. And by the contents and the spin about that book, it appears that Gillard is among the white kind of male fans of Roxana Fayaz, who see her as a kind of non-radical Muslim woman who should be used by and useful to those who run the narrative of anti-Muslim kind of public life persons or personnel. In that way, she fits the general role being played by Sadiq Khan as well. Because Sadiq Khan, after he got elected in 2016 at the expense of London, had his coronation staged at the Sadak Cathedral, despite the fact that he made a big play of his being Muslim and from Pakistan and all the rest of it. He did not have to have the Sadak Cathedral for his coronation. He could have had a neutral venue, not a mosque, not a temple, not a gurdwara, but not a cathedral either. But the fact that this moron, Sadiq Khan, chose the cathedral was only one of the many mental slavish things that he did, and he has been doing. In the crowd and in the kind of among the speech makers, there was hardly anyone from the Muslim background or the Asian background or the African background. There were maybe a few tokens, but the majority were white women. That was significant because it was a slap in the face of the image of Muslims who are condemned for putting down women. So Sadiq Khan is surrounded by mainly white women. And as I have said for years before Sadiq Khan got anywhere near being even a candidate for mayor at the expense of London, Sadiq Khan was controlled by a white racist woman solicitor for years. And it was because of my public condemnation of her, control over Sadiq Khan, that she has not been appointed by Sadiq Khan to any publicly seen or visible post. Solely because of my work in denouncing her and her role as the racist who was employed at the GLC by the GLC police committee. And she was a racist conspiracy kind of operative and a liar. And she has nothing but racist contempt for people of African and Asian origin. She may pretend to be otherwise. For example, when she's handling, she is the mistress, that is the controller of Sadiq Khan and his likes. So she would be more than happy to smile at Sadiq Khan or with him. But essentially, she was controlling him. And she was one of the people, she was the most notorious one that I know of that controlled Sadiq Khan's politics and political career. So Sadiq Khan and Roxana Fiaz are the type of mental slaves, stooges for racists that do not pose, according to the racists, any threat to the racist status quo. That is wrong, because being treated as stooges and kind of given help as stooges, which is what Michael Gillard has done to bolster the image of Roxana Fiaz in his book about the 2012 games and the corruption that took place around it and the secret kind of society and the secret forces and elements that corrupted Newham councils and resources and still do. So these people, him, Michael Gillard, and Dave Hill of The Guardian, and Paul Waugh of the Politics website, whatever, and some others like them have been peddling, and The Guardian, of course, have been peddling the image of Roxana Fiaz as a mayor that is acceptable and is doing a reasonably good job. She's not. And in her boasts on 12th of March 2018 on their channel, live program on the 12th of March 2018, 2 days before I encountered and challenged Robin Wales on the same channel. In her boasts, Roxana Fiaz said that Newham was a Labour stronghold. And the presenter didn't have a clue as to how to even ask a follow-up question on that. It wasn't clear that this presenter knew what she meant or what the implication of that was. Now, the fact is that Newham is a criminal den, politically, a criminal den occupied by a bunch of criminals who have been in control of the Labour Party in Newham for a century. Well, almost a century. And the fact that she was able to say it was a stronghold without being challenged there shows that she knew that this presenter would not be able to challenge her. Even if she didn't know, the assertion, the utterance deserved and warranted and demanded an immediate challenge. Now, this edition of the Kudilar campaign, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, being broadcast as part 2 of the diagnosis on Wednesday, the 14th of October 2020, is making up for that and covering that very serious gap and area. In Nivam, there is no political party that is democratically active. And I mean, this includes mainly the so-called branches of the Labour Party in Nivam. They are all corrupt. And they are behaving like a collection of crooks and criminals that are serving their particular criminal agenda personally. They are not accountable. They are not democratic. They are not anywhere near 100 miles of democracy. One of these liars is John Gray, of course, who is Roxana Fiaz's deputy mayor, the favorite deputy mayor, and this criminal liar, racist, is supposedly the head of the council's housing disaster. That is one, and we shall be having a lot of evidential content published about him and his role. And he has got another one, not necessarily another council kind of cabinet post holder. Last time I checked, he was only a councillor, but was involved in the so-called scrutiny committee. And this one is called Whitworth, John Whitworth. Now, Whitworth was promoted to me as a man with conscience and an honest person. I had no knowledge of Whitworth in any shape or form, except a member of the Labour Party volunteered the information to me about Whitworth. In conversations that I was having about the length and the depth of the corruption of Nivam Council. Now, if that is the case, that he was a honest, conscientious person, which was added as part of the kind of praise for him or of him, that he was knowledgeable as well, and he was kind of a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn because of the principle. So on that basis, I asked this source what this source could establish from John Whitworth about why Nivam Council was allowing brazen liars as employees of Nivam Council to continue lying unlawfully, illegally, and against the known, objectively known and established, evidentially correctly established claims of persons in Nivam who needed or were entitled to be served various services by Nivam Council on the facts, on the needs, on the evidence. Now, this is something that needs to be elaborated on, expanded on over a number of editions of this channel's program. This is now coming to about 8 minutes to 10 GMT in the morning of Wednesday, the 14th of October 2020. So it's just about an hour, I think. We shall be continuing in the part C. Remember, we are doing the diagnosis of the media, and this is the one that we are focusing on. We are focused on the mayor and the lying mayor. And I've given name, chapter, dates, and platforms and events to completely reject the lying stupidity of the Times first editorial today. It's not a record. It's not a newspaper of record. It's a newspaper of lies. On if this is the evidence, on this evidence,